Weeks after the events in Bhutan, Credence Barebone woke up shivering, his thin blanket long, discarded in a fit of restless dreaming. He hadn't slept soundly since the day he learned the truth about his birth, family, about his brother, about himself. It wasn't this way at first. For nearly 2 months following the battle with the Infiari, there had been peace. Peace in his mind, peace in his magic. It was like having a splinter removed from his soul, a splinter that had been put there by a dark spell woven by his mother, a spell that twisted his magic and bound it up with pain until his brother had come to rip it out. But now the wounds had reopened. Every night, Credence dreamt of a great bird, its feathers ablaze with gold and red, and it spoke to him in a language older than time, yet he understood its words perfectly. And the words were spells, not dark spells, but light, ancient and filled with power, spells that sang of creation and whispered to him of worlds beyond imagining. But when he woke, they faded like smoke on the wind, leaving him aching for something he could not name. He had come to believe that the obscurial within him was gone. How could it not be after what Aberforth had done? The old wizard had ripped it from him, had torn it to pieces with his love and understanding. Aberforth had shown him that he wasn't a monster, that he wasn't broken. In fact, he was immensely powerful, far more so than he could have ever imagined. Yet, here in Godric's Hollow, alone in the cottage where he'd lived with Aberforth for most of his life, he felt a new stirring within him, something powerful, wild, and free. The ancient spells swirled around his heart, making it ache. He could feel their magic thrumming beneath his skin, their energy filling him, until he felt as though he would burst. Albus Dumbledore sensed it too, a new ripple in the fabric of magic, a disturbance tied somehow to his own family tree. He had been watching Credence since the moment he stepped foot into the British Ministry of Magic. In the weeks since, the young man had blossomed. Watching him had been easy. All he had to do was sense for traces of his magic, which were strong, yet contained, carefully hidden away as Credence tried to live a normal life. It had been an interesting choice, taking on such a persona, one that made him stick out even more. But Dumbledore understood. After all, he himself had once been quite fond of a flamboyant display of magic. Grindelwald had called it his Of course, the Brazilian had also pointed out that it made him an easy target. Dumbledore had only shrugged at that, reveling in the attention. He supposed that in some ways, he and this young man were more alike than he'd originally thought. But now the magic swirling around Credence was different, no longer contained, but raging, as though something had woken up inside him. Dumbledore felt a chill crawl down his spine as he realized where he had seen that look before. It had been on a cold November evening, almost 60 years prior. He remembered the raw power pulsing around him, the sense of impending doom, the smell of ozone and burnt flesh. That kind of magic did not belong to this world. It belonged to the darkest depths of the universe, two creatures whose very existence defied the laws of nature, two beings whose power dwarfed anything the human mind could comprehend. The chill turned to ice as realization dawned on him. This was the kind of magic wielded by the obscurial. Where was Credence? Was he in danger? No, Credence was never in danger. Not while Aberforth was still breathing, but that wasn't what worried Dumbledore. It was what Credence might become. The headmaster apparated to Nurmengard as fast as he could, where he found a massive magical storm forming over the village. Lightning cracked, thunder boomed, and the wind screamed like a banshee. It was wild and untamed, as though the very forces of nature were writhing in pain. What had happened here? What had happened to Credence? Dumbledore landed in an empty street. The windows of the few nearby houses were rattling in their frames, and he could hear terrified whispers coming from within. What was happening to this place? Why was its magic reacting this way? Suddenly, the wind shifted and he smelled ozone, the telltale sign of immense power being wielded, of magic unlike any he'd ever seen before. He looked up just in time to see a streak of gold light shoot towards the sky, disappearing into the clouds above. With a determined nod, Dumbledore followed it, pushing through the veil of rain and wind until he came to a clearing on the outskirts of town. There, perched on a rock, monolith, was a small cottage, just like the one he'd left behind in Godric's Hollow. And there, standing before it, was Credence Barebone, or rather, something that used to be Credence Barebone. The young man was gone, replaced by a creature of pure magic, wreathed in flame and lightning. Its eyes burned with golden fire, and its hair flowed around its shoulders like molten gold. On its face, Dumbledore saw features that could only belong to one person, the brother of Credence, the lost and found son of Percival, Theseus. Credence was gone, but in his place stood something far greater, far more powerful. Dumbledore stared in awe as the being raised its hands, sending bolts of gold magic arcing into the sky. They connected with others just like them. Streaks of crimson, emerald, and sapphire, weaving together into a massive shield against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. The storm raged on below, but here, bathed in the light of their combined magic, everything was still. It was beautiful. The being turned, its fiery gaze meeting Dumbledore's directly. Recognition dawned in its eyes. Or perhaps it was simply acknowledging the presence of another powerful wizard. Either way, Dumbledore knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. For the past 3 years, he had been searching for answers, trying to find a way to defeat the rising darkness, trying to understand the threat posed by Grindelwald and his followers. But he had been looking in the wrong places. The answer had been here all along, hidden in plain sight. The truth behind Credence's origin was never fully revealed. Not by his brother, not by Aberforth, not even by Tina. Only Gellert Grindelwald knew that Credence was Perseus, and he took his secret to his grave. So when Credence disappeared, when Dumbledore tracked the source of his magic to this clearing, when he saw the truth of who this being was, he understood. This was why Grindelwald had searched for Credence, why he had been willing to kill so many to get to him. This was what he believed himself to be, a descendant of the most powerful wizards who had ever lived. A being of pure magic, a true Hufflepuff, destined to sit by his side and rule the world. But that wasn't what happened. No, because there was someone else who understood Credence better than anyone. Someone who loved him enough to help him choose a different path. The old wizard had seen the darkness inside Credence, the pain, the fear, and the anger, and he'd met it with kindness, understanding, and most importantly, acceptance. He'd shown Credence what it meant to be a good man, a decent wizard, and a loyal friend. And in doing so, he'd earned Credence's trust, his respect, and ultimately his love. And because of that, Credence had chosen to walk away from Grindelwald's offer, to reject his destiny as a conqueror, and instead live a simple life as a baker's apprentice. A life that was cut tragically short. But if what Dumbledore suspected was true, then this wasn't the end. No, it was just the beginning.